at the Victoria Tool Library. Today we're going to go over this lathe here, all the safety, all the different settings that you need to know, and how to use the tools. Maybe turn a little project, and to give you more skill and ability when you take this out for borrow for your home projects. So this lathe is a Delta lathe. It's a half horsepower, which is a powerful lathe. It's a smaller lathe, which means you won't be able to do large table legs, but you will be able to do small projects. It's a 6-speed belt-driven lathe, adjustable through the different speeds from 500 up to 3700. This lathe comes with a drive center, bowl plate, spacer ring, breakout bar, and wrench. So the first thing you need to know about using a lathe or any power tool in general is safety. Safety of yourself and safety of others. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to be using a dust mask and eye protection, which you should as well at home. Things to know about this lathe: whenever you're doing any sort of work on this lathe, whether it's plugged in or not, make sure that you have no rings on your fingers and you have no watches, short sleeves. If you do have a ring that you cannot remove, it's best to put some sort of hockey tape or athletic tape around it to give that ring no wear for anything to snag it or grab it while it's turning. This will keep your fingers on your hands where they should be. Okay, to go quickly over the different parts, we have the power switch up here. We have headstock with the pulley wheel. You have your 8:1 teeth ratio, threaded portion, bed, tool rest, tailstock with a live center. The tool rest is adjustable with handles, so it can be locked in or moved around as needed. And also the angle can be changed and the height can be raised as needed. Same with the tool stock or the tail stock, handle in the back, and then slid out of the way if required, or slid in again as required. Here you have your on-off switch with safety release. You have your speed access port for the top spindle, and then you have your motor pulley access port down here. To change your speed settings, currently we're on the 2650 setting. So say if I wanted to go down to 500, I basically loosen off this bolt, let the motor come up so that I can get slack in the belt, and then slowly wiggle my way, wiggle the belt back and forth, and then this will move the belt to the different settings. So as you move the belt to a different smaller pulley on the motor side, your corresponding headstock size should change as well. That way you're not stretching the belt or missing any teeth, like drive teeth. And you just work it back and forth. So I set it to 800. See. So I'd like to point out, you want to make sure that your belt is sitting on your pulley's teeth and you don't have it half off. If it is, simply lift up, give it a slight push over on the belt till you can see that the belt is fully seated on your pulleys. Once you've done this, you can simply just put a little pressure on this down handle and tighten up. Then you can close your panels, and that's it. So part of turning is finding the center on your whatever you're going to turn to the best of your ability. So one secret for especially dimensional lumber that usually is fairly close to square. I like to take a square, adjustable square, set it to about where I think that the half is, strike a line, and I do that for all the different sides. Doesn't have to be perfect, because none of us are, but so it's hard to see. I don't know if we can see it, but about there is my center. So I have two here, but I realize that I'm going to just be using one. So that's a good one. On this side, I've already struck the four corners. And again, if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, line up your corners, take your tool, strike down. Yeah, basically right on the line. So either way is acceptable. If you have a smaller piece, or if you want an actual different shape, you can offset your center, and then eventually it will turn down to whatever its own point to point will be. So a key note about using this tool rest whenever you're turning is ensure that your tool, wherever you're using to cut, is resting fully on that tool rest. Otherwise you can get into a situation where tool will grab and either spring up or slip off and potentially hurt yourself. So you don't always have to do this, but for this demonstration, I'm going to take our drive center. I'm going to line it up with the previously struck marks. This is just a demonstration piece of wood. Give it a tap. Now, when I go to put that in the lathe, I have a larger mark that I can reference. So what I'm going to do is on this side, I'm going to do the exact same thing. And then that will be, I'll be able to center this on my live center. So to install the drive center, it's just a simple into the headstock, and you're basically done. So the reason that the drive center will stay in there is you have a large taper, and as that taper goes in, the center will just be pushed in on both sides. There's a taper on both sides, and as you put your work in and tighten it in, the force of the tightening will keep those centers in. Bring your tailstock in, handle down to tighten. Ensure that your adjustment screw is loose, and then just slowly dial in until you see your drive center teeth grab. So once you see those drive center teeth start to grab and moving, then you give it an extra half turn to a 3/4 turn, so you know you're good and seated. You should be good. And then from here, we'll start turning. So just as a rule of thumb, the larger your piece, the slower it should be turning. So this piece, which is about 1 1/4 inch squared, would turn about around 2,700 RPM. But for this demonstration, we're going to turn it at 800. And for the information on tool rests, it's very critical that you keep your tool rest at the appropriate height. So on this squared part, we should be essentially at the same height as as the edge. Just adjust it there, and then you can give your piece a couple of spins to figure out where your closest edge is, and you should never be any closer than touching. You should never be your tool rest should never touch. As you turn, it should be you will have to stop and adjust your tool rest. Okay. At the Victoria Tool Library, we have a wonderful selection of tools donated by the community. Here you can see some of the tools that we have. Gouge, large gouge, finger gouge, scraper, smaller skew, large skew, small skew. I believe this might be a decorative bead tool, and then this would be a parting tool. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using the large bowl couch. Mask up. Everybody's used to that this year. Also, eye protection. This is a full face. Highly recommended to use a full face, as chips can and will hit you in the face. Another point that I should point out, you want your work area clear between the lathe and the edge of your bench. This just keeps things from rolling, falling on you, distracting you as the tool's turning. You want the least amount of distractions as the wood turns or the object turns. So, okay, we're gonna start turning. So if you come see this, you can hear that little click, 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 click. So it's just a little bit out of alignment. I'm just giving it a bit of tension on the spindle. But if you can see how it's flashing up and down like that, so it's not quite square or not quite straight, which is fine because we'll just turn it straight. And I'm going to do that now. You want to leave about ½ inch from the drive center. That will be your sacrificial part, because you don't want to be getting so close that you put your tool up against your steel and you cut it. So I've left that about a ½ inch to about 3/4 of an inch, just to give you an idea of how far your tool rest should be away from your drive center. Okay. So when you're starting out with your bowl gouge, it's shaped like a U, and you want to start with this edge or this edge straight up and down, and then at a small increasing angle, and that way your chips will hit and then break off and fly away. And then as you get better, you can start rolling and dipping and all sorts of things. So you can see I've changed the speed I changed the speed up to the 1800 mark, and previously we were at the 800 mark. So that's a good example of how better this will turn just with the change of speed. So the smaller the size, the faster you can run this. So I'll show you the 36 or the 3700 speed now. As you can hear from that speed, turning quite a bit faster and gives you a bit smoother cut. There's no jumping, just goes for it. So when you're turning, it's always important to make sure that you're taking light cuts. What's a light cut, you might ask? Well, light cut has to do with the angle of your bevel and how much the angle of the tool, and also how much force you're putting into it. You should never be trying to force as much as you can into a rotating piece. So it all has to do with just letting the tool take the cuts and let the piece do the turning. Never try and force your tool in. And you'll feel your tool as it starts to dull and when you should sharpen. I usually like to, every half hour, if I'm using one tool, I give it a good sharpen after that, about half hour of turning. So I've left this part over on the lathe at the 3700 mark for turning, just to show you that you can take off corners, but it just requires that extra little bit, because you can see this is fur, so it's going to splinter, but I'll go through it and I'll show you that it is possible. So the same rule of thumb happens down at the base with your live center, that you're going to need to leave a little bit of play unless that's not in your design. But if you don't want to be hitting your live center with your tool, that's just going to damage it. So if you look over here, you can already see that in that quick amount of time, I've already gotten a little bit of an increased gap. I just simply move tool rest a little bit closer. Give it a quick hand spin so that nothing's contacting, and I can keep on going. When using this tool, your edges, whatever direction you're going in to attack your wood, this edge, you should think about it as being straight up and down. So that's straight on. And then you want to bring it on a slight angle, almost to that of the bevel. You want to get that over top of the bevel. And then give it a slight up or slight down angle, which raises the tool up. So as this turns, the angle comes in, giving you a slight skew cut. And then gripping overhand for security and safety. But you can also hold it thumb in the channel if you need to do finer cuts. Obviously, you don't want your fingers going past your tool rest, and obviously never near your wood. Okay, This one's a bit easier. So square stock, so you just rest it directly on the tool rest, and then you just bring it. You can bring it in and out, and then along as you need it.
Cool.
Yep. This next tool that I'm showing you is called the scraper. Is the fingernail gouge. This is usually used for decorative beading and small radiuses that you need to turn. So to remove a piece, all you simply do is loosen up your set screw, back your tail stock out, or back your live center out, and remove your piece. Okay, I'm going to switch over to my Nova chuck. Remove your drive center, take your breaker bar, just tap it through, and then you can remove your drive center. If you need to remove your live center, same on the back, tap it out. All the tapers on the lathe are what's known as a mortar taper number 2. And then, as you can see by the size, that's how they fit in. Okay. When putting the Nova chuck onto the lathe, never leave it loose. Always bring it up until it's tight. Put your breaker bar in your positioning hole, and then make sure it's hand tight. That way when you spin it on, or when you turn it on, you'll be able to get it off. So we're going to go over the Nova chuck. It's a 4-jaw chuck. It can be used for spindles like this, or for any other bowls. You can usually flip these jaws around, grab larger or smaller items. Key safety point about the Nova chuck: never leave the key in the chuck. Absolutely never. It's either the key is in and you're using it, or the key is out. You go to start this and the key is still in, you're gonna get it's gonna go flying, or it's gonna hit the base and damage the lathe. So on longer items like this, you wouldn't really use longer items on the Nova chuck like this, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm putting it in, and I'm just gonna throw the tail stock on lightly on, just for demonstrations. once your project is turned to the spot where you want it, you can start sanding. So whenever you're sanding, this is the part where you do not need the tool rest. So you will move it completely out of the way so that there's nothing between you and the spinning wood. Now this may seem a little scary, but as long as you're keeping pressure either underneath and pushing up or on top, you'll be fine. And again, you have nothing on your sleeve, no sleeves, no long sleeves, nothing, no rings or watches. So usually, because you're always turning on the long grain, what you normally have to do is sand directionally with the grain, and that finishes it off. So when sanding, we were using a sanding block, which is good because it keeps your hands, keeps the heat away from your hands. But if you don't have a sanding block and you're using a piece of sandpaper, it's important to remember that as you're sanding, you have to keep your hands away from the work, from pushing directly onto the work, because the heat generated from the friction will burn your hands. So by that I mean hold it on both ends and just let the piece turn, and you just hold the pressure. So I'll turn it on to give you an example. If you need to, for small little parts, just take a corner and work it in, roll it into the little gap. So when you're doing your sanding, the rule of thumb is you turn fast and sand slow. So the slower you can sand, the less heat that's going to travel through your sandpaper. So in this demonstration today, we were turning Douglas fir, which is a great construction lumber, but not great for turning, as you can see. I mean, it's got large growth rings, so that meant it was somewhat splintery. But great Canadian turning woods are maple, birches, yews, and then from there you get into different woods, usually from the US, like cherry and gum and hornbeam, which are quite hard and have make a good polish. So if you would like to borrow this tool, it's at the tool library, and take it home and make your own pile of sawdust. There's also, if you found this video helpful but not quite enough, there's plenty of information online using Google. You can just look for wood lathe turning, wood lathe safety, to get an idea of what else is out there. This is in no way comprehensive, but gives you an idea of what's required. And I hope that you enjoy your turnings, and I'll see you around the tool library. Bye.